Hey, everybody, it's Matt Michaels here on the DeFalco Files with the owner and creator of FSW, Future Stars of Wrestling here in Las Vegas, Mr. Joe DeFalco. Joe, how you doing today?
Oh, fantastic. We're ready to hit the new year and nothing positive to say. So.
And I'm sure that we have with our guest today someone who does have something positive to say about anything. You know, you might know him as Greg Sharp.
Gregory,
Gregory Sharp, Gregory. But I gotta say, Hyperstreak, that guy is way better than that Greg guy.
I mean, I guess so. A little bit. Yeah, am I Joe? You know both. Which one? Which one do you prefer?
I was a big fan of Gregory Sharp, to be honest with you.
Well, let's start with that, Joe. What did you see in what he was doing as a younger wrestler that caught your eye, and when did you first catch wind of Greg's career?
Well, I had no idea who the fuck Gregory Sharp was till he knocked on the door and walked into the Boulder Highway School. And up until about a year ago, I never realized that he was as young as he was because he introduced himself. He was talking about how he trained with Jesse Hernandez. And, for some reason, I probably thought he was like 22, 23 years old then. And I don't think I found out till like a year ago. He was like 19 years old when he actually came to FSW, because just knowing and hearing that he had been training elsewhere, it automatically put him at an older age than I would have thought. And it was never really brought up.
Wow. Greg, Jesse Hernandez obviously was just mentioned, but what age did you actually start training at, and where did you officially start training at?
I started training just real quick because Joe had actually forgot a part of how he and I met, was that I actually sent him an email prior to me coming out to Las Vegas, because at the time I was still in Louisiana. And so I had heard about FSW, I found out about it. So I sent him an email like maybe a month or two before I came out and moved to Las Vegas. And I remember his response. I told him, "Hey, I'm Greg. I trained at Jesse Hernandez. I have like a little experience under my belt. I'm moving out to Las Vegas soon." And I remember his response was, "Oh, that's great. Don't forget to watch the show on MyLV or whatever network we had going at the time." And I was just like, "All right, well, this is a great start."
Joe, did you send him a form email response?
No, it wasn't, but I'm assuming I got a lot of emails at that time. Maybe I confused him with somebody who was, looking at coming down, because again, if I had $1 for everybody who sent me an email, "Oh, I'm moving down, I'm going to be a wrestler, I want to do this," I'd have $1 million, because there's so many people that send emails and then never show up. So
yeah, that's true.
So I don't really remember the gist of why I sent the email that way to respond to him. So again, it could have been confusion, or it could have been, "Hey, a guy coming to Vegas who may never train at FSW, but hey, he likes wrestling, so maybe we can at least get him to watch."
Very true. Very true.
Because once he sees Jack Slammy, he's going to be hooked.
Oh yeah, that's what kept me around. It was Jack Slammy. Yeah. Anyway, so back to the original question. I started training back when I was 18. I'm originally from California, but earlier on in my life, me and my family, we moved to Louisiana. But it became very apparent to me when I was about 15, 16 years old that pro wrestling, independent wrestling was for me. That's the thing that I had to do. So as soon as, maybe not as soon as I graduated high school, but maybe about 5-6 months, I worked at a Blockbuster just to save up money. And then I moved out to San Bernardino so I could train with Jesse Hernandez. San Bernardino, it just didn't work out for me, unfortunately. So I wound up spending another year back in Louisiana trying to make together some kind of plan. And then that's when I heard through a friend, Peter Avalon, about wrestling in Las Vegas. And I found out there was 2 promotions. I found out that there was Adrenaline Unleashed, and I found Future Stars of Wrestling.
So what you're saying is there was one promotion.
Well, hold on. Let me bury Adrenaline. Let me.
Oh, okay. All right. There you go.
I took one look at Adrenaline, and other than Tommy Misfit, I realized like that was not the place for me. So of course I went straight to FSW, and yeah, about that time I was 19. That was 2011. So I was I'm sorry, I was 20 years old, and I turned 21 when I was living in Las Vegas.
Wow. Do you think that going into the situation of finding FSW, and then do you think the training you had was a good foundation walking in the door, so that you were able to get a little more attention a little quicker?
Yeah, absolutely. But having known Joe, it's your dedication that matters more than like your in-ring ability. Like I've been with FSW, of course, since 2011. I've had a huge hand in helping a lot of people train, and so I've been able to see everybody come and go over the past 9 years. And I know what Joe likes. I know what Joe doesn't like. And what Joe doesn't like is, like he's saying, people who show up and they tell you, "Oh, I want to be a wrestler. I want to be a wrestler." But then when it actually comes time to train and put in the work and like have that dedication to pro wrestling, a lot of people fall off from that. So they may be cool for like a week or two, but since I was just always there and I love professional wrestling, that's what kind of kept me in it. It was very like we all go through stuff like the highs and the lows of wrestling, but for me, it's really funny. It's like I said, the highs and lows. So I feel my lowest with wrestling, but I also feel my absolute highest with wrestling. So I could be having a terrible day because of wrestling, but then when I get in the ring and start wrestling, then everything's all better again. It's a very strange, maybe kind of bad relationship, but it's what I got.
No, that's actually a very good way to describe it. So Joe, when you have Greg, coming to the school now and starting with FSW, where did you see him fitting in? At what point did you start using him on cards?
To be honest, I'm not really sure exactly when it was, but the fact of the matter was he kind of already knew what he was doing. So that put him way ahead a lot of the younger students. And you got to remember in 2011, there wasn't like, 30 guys you could put on a card from Vegas that were part of FSW at that time. It was, slim pickings. It was, especially the undercard talent, I was always going to be bringing in guys because they worked inexpensively because they wanted to get on shows. And we started to build a reputation of, whether it was the Silver Nugget where we were packing that place to where we, moved on to Sam's Town in probably 2012. So, if I remember correctly, Greg got on some shows early. I remember, pitching him the idea of being Gregory King, Kenny's brother, just trying to get different things. Because I remember they had a match and I was watching it and I thought Greg may have pissed off Kenny because it looked like Kenny was firing away with these punches outside the ring. I'm like, uh-oh, I think Sharp fucked up. And it was like, oh, it was just them having some fun. And it was good stuff. So, Greg was able to sell. Greg was able, to do some cool stuff, but more importantly, and the reason I liked working with Greg was his demeanor. He understood patience, which unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Right.
At that time, Mike Modest was our head trainer, and Mike was probably at his best at that point where he was still motivated, and nobody's going to argue whether he could be a good or bad trainer, but there was guys, disciples, Greg Romero, things like that, where they were a little more hot-headed. You know, maybe they saw how Modest would yell and scream at people. And for 10 years, even to this day, you know, when we've had our main trainers, there's always been the few guys that we trust to help out if Sin can't be there, if Kenny can't be there. You know, nowadays, you know, Lacey and Damian Drake and Matt Vandergriff are guys that are part of that. But beforehand, you know, Greg was like the main guy that if we needed somebody to fill in, I would want him to run the class, because not only did he treat people well, he was nice to people, but he also tried to teach you right and wrong. And it's the same thing whenever we did a student showcase. If I had a younger guy that I thought was barely ready to go, I would say, hey, Greg, I need you to work this guy. You know, I remember the one guy that Kevin Cross threw around, the Brandon kid. And,
Yeah.
and I basically told Greg exactly what I needed him to do. There was no set match. It was like, you know what? Give this kid a little bit. If he does all right, give him a little more. If he doesn't, you know, put him away. In cases with other people, a lot of times if the young rookie kid screws up, all of a sudden he gets fucking plastered because the veteran guy, you know, didn't like working somebody who was that green, and maybe he was nervous and fucked up. While Greg was always so patient. Like, I can list numerous guys that we've put in with him. More recently, a guy like Damon that gave him a little bit more, that maybe if he was working somebody else, the match format would have been, this is what we're doing, 5 minutes, this is what you do. But I always gave Greg the freedom to feel the guy out and do whatever he felt was best.
That's, I think, one of the highest praises you can get, Greg. What was your perspective on having that mantle kind of earned by your examples that you set? Now you get to pass it on to other guys. You know, how do you go about that, and what does it feel like for you to know that you're a trusted hand in the development of these young guys?
That's great. I've always loved teaching. Prior to wrestling, even I did martial arts. I did jujitsu for about 9 years. So at the about 4 or 5 year mark, that's when they kind of need you to learn by teaching others. And they kind of teach you how to be a leader, kind of teach you how to be a better person, be more of an adult by, okay, we need, this person's relying on you. You have to teach them how to roll. You have to teach them how to perform an arm bar. You have to teach them how to get out of a certain move. So going into teaching and wrestling, I already had a little bit of experience with that. So I know how I like to be treated. I know how other people, I have an idea of how other people like to be treated. So going into it, for me, it's a high honor, just like Joe's saying, or just like you're saying, to be able to understand that I'm in this position, that I'm trusted with the students, because a lot of people want that position. And I've seen other really talented wrestlers who you would think like, oh, you will be a great teacher, but they just don't have that patience, or they don't have that skill to be able to work with somebody and just have, no, it's okay.
I think he froze.
He did. Yeah.
Going so fast, you froze.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Well, my cousin froze him, like it's in my blood. All
So,
right, one pop with the Disney joke, I'll take it.
so you're talking about enjoying teaching and getting that chance, and that having that background in martial arts, understanding the difference between patience and discipline as opposed to hot-headedness and bullying in a sense. um is there a student or two that stands out over the past almost decade that you've been doing that, that you really enjoyed working with and you think that excelled, you know, to where you thought they would excel?
Oh man. Like I was trying to say, there's no one person where I could look at them and say, okay, you have everything because of me. There's so many other people. Like we have what makes FSW as a training school great is that we have so many minds influencing people. So on any given day, you'll have Sid Bodie, or you'll have me, or Remy Marcel, Cody, you'll have Kenny King, so on and so forth. So everyone has a hand in teaching everybody. But recently, I see a lot of myself in Ricky Gomez from Suavecitos. Um, Ricky is a really great guy, and him and Danny are, like you would say, really excelling. Like recently, they had a match. I want to say it was against Sky High, and they were doing stuff. It's like I never showed you any of that. Where are you getting this from? So they're just like they're taking what I'm showing them, and they're just developing their own style. And it's really crazy to see how quickly they're advancing. Another person who's really blowing us all away would be Alice Blair. Like she's so young and she's so quiet and very kind of like respectful, and I'd even say timid. So a lot of times you're like, oh yeah, that's Alice, that's Alice. She's just there. But then she's wrestling and it's like, who the hell are you? Where did this come from? Like she's so powerful. She's there. She's on top of it. She's alive. And it's like, we didn't even know that you had this in you. And she's only 6 matches in. So that's really cool. I mean, I can't say, I don't think anyone can take credit for him because he is who he is. And that's what makes him great. But Ice Williams, I'm so proud of that guy. Like he's such an incredible talent. And I think what makes someone really talented is that they're not trying to sell you anything. It's not like, oh, hey, I'm so-and-so, and say this and do this. And this is how I pose. No, Ice Williams that's how he was the day I met him. And that's how he is. We just he just found some tights and we taught him how to roll. But everything that makes Ice Williams, that's him. And I think he's really incredible. I think I didn't have his first match, but I had his 7th match, which would have been his first main event for the student showcase sometime last year. He just really gone beyond anything we could have imagined such a quick amount of time. So yeah, those are some people I'm very proud of. But I'm proud of everyone that gets in there and does a roll or takes a bump and just continues. Like I have so many guys that haven't got there yet, but they're so close, and every day they're making progress, and every week they're making progress, and they're still young, they're still hungry, and they still want it. And as long as you want that, and as long as you're not sitting on the sidelines or complaining, then I always got you. I always got you.
That's, I mean, what else can you want from a mentor or a coach? This is exactly the reason that FSW has a great school. Joe, when you look at Greg's start of his FSW career, what really got his train rolling in your mind, and where did you see him going? How did you start, you know, getting him booked into the shows that you have?
I actually do remember my first match real quick because Joe didn't remember, but I remember. It was him. It was me and actually I want to say Corey Phillips. I know they were wrestling Mike.
Cold hearted.
Yeah, my old best friend. We were wrestling Mike Modest and Delight at the time. That was the very first match. So I had shown up in January, and I showed up for the last Silver Nugget show. And then I want to say about a month later, I got to have my first opportunity on show. And it was actually in August of 2011. That was our first Samstown show.
Wow.
You know, Greg was the guy, you know, you don't want to pigeonhole people, but because of his athleticism and the way he moved, he was a guy we considered, hey, he's part of the No Limits division. You know,
Yeah.
and being part of the No Limits division, you know, he'll tell you he's the king of the 4 ways and the 5 ways. And the key is always trying to get people on shows. And sometimes that 4 or 5 way is a mix of guys like Shikanabati and Chupacabra, who are coming in from NorCal. But then
Evan Daniels and Evan Daniels and Evan
Yes.
Daniels and
You know.
Evan Daniels.
And then it's also guys that are like Lorenzo C. Henderson, who's some of our younger guys that we're trying to give them an opportunity. After seeing what Greg was capable of doing, we had an idea. I had an idea for a faction. And there was a manager who was actually at our very first Silver Nugget show, GG Severe. And he was a very interesting person.
Yeah.
To say the least.
To say the least.
He was a guy who would be in full character cutting promos, on the other side of where people were. And I remember one time I was like by there and everybody thought he was yelling at me, but he was playing out his promo in his head. And because of his promos, we decided Clutch, who was young, up and coming, Greg, that we were going to put this together with another guy that we liked a lot, Cedric the Hitman. And, Cedric was the glue that kind of held the agency together. And unfortunately, just a lot of issues came and went with Cedric and adding people in and taking people out that unfortunately it just never meshed. Sometimes things work out and sometimes things don't work out. But I think it was a good platform for Greg, just to be involved a little bit more, to where instead of wrestling random matches, he actually got to be at least part of a story, or he was involved in stuff, right, wrong, indifferent, good match, bad match. The idea was we were investing time into him as a character. And I always said, because that's the back and forth we've had about the Hyper Street character and Gregory Sharp, that I always remember at the Boulder Highway School, I don't know who he was feuding with or working with, but I just remember this impassioned promo that I felt Greg, who was young, good looking, in really good shape, can cut a really good promo, had good facials. I always felt that the Gregory Sharp character had more of a open ceiling than the Hyper Street character, because I felt, covering him up and not really talking a lot and all that other stuff, would take away from things. But you can't argue the popularity that actually Hyper Streak has really gotten, especially now that we started doing the Nevada State title tournament. And, the focus is on the fact that he's never won a championship, not only in FSW, but in professional wrestling. And now he's in the finals. So there's a great story to be told. The problem is telling that story is taking a year instead of together in 2 or 3 months, to where people could remember things. Hey, you remember when he said this, this, and this? And it's like, no, not really, because that happened in July. You know what I mean? So it's really disappointing that ideas that we've had to put together, and this should be a big moment. Him and Remy Marcel battling it out. The only title Remy Marcel hasn't won, versus, the guy who's looking for his first championship ever. And here's a guy who's traveled all over the world. I remember he came into the office and he was like, yeah, I'm going to be traveling around. I'm like, how you getting around? Oh, I'm going to be hitchhiking. And it's, what the fuck? Are you like insane? You're going to be like found dead in the fucking streets on the highway. Like, he's going all over the country, and he went to Alaska, but
not Alaska.
You didn't go to Alaska?
No, I went to Canada. So first I went all over the US, and then from there I came back to the West Coast, got my passport, immediately went up to Canada, traveled all the way across Canada, came back to the US for a little bit, went down to Mexico to train for about 3 or 4 months, came back to the US. That's when Luke Hawks got me my first opportunity overseas with the Knight family. So I started doing the British camps there. And then I traveled a little bit in Europe, and then so on and so forth.
Wow.
So yeah, so then there became a time frame to where we couldn't use him that much because he was in and out. So it was like now those random matches became really random because you didn't even know if he was going to be on the next show, if he was going somewhere else. So there was a long time frame to where, you know, we didn't see him for 8 months. Then we didn't see him for 3 months. Then we saw him for a couple months and didn't see him again. You know, then he got the opportunity to go to China. And then I believe he got hurt like the first match or something like that there.
Wow. Is that true? What happened with that?
Yeah, that's an unfortunate truth.
Hmm.
Yeah, in the first match, I hurt my left shoulder, and it was just kind of a freak accident. We reviewed the tape several times, and in the move, it was just a bulldog and looked totally normal. Nothing weird about it, nothing bad about it. But yeah, my shoulder just gave out in that moment, and then became like being on kind of like on the shelf for pretty much all that summer. And then just trying to slowly come back and work myself back into wrestling and work myself back into the gym and everything like that.
In that type of situation, do you stay in China, or did you come back to the States when you knew that it was,
No,
you
I
know,
stayed. I stayed. I stayed in China, and we saw the doctors out there, and which was pretty fun or crazy experience in that in itself. And then we just kind of waited and tried to see what would happen. Eventually, I went back, but that was with the entire crew. We all came back because the visa was only for 60 days. So
right?
we came back for that June, July came, then August came, and then it came, hey, do you want to try again? And I said, yes, of course, I want to try again. I think I'll be ready to go. And I did wind up going back to China. It still was too much of an issue for me to be able to stay. So I only wound up staying about 5, maybe 6 weeks instead of the whole 8, and got sent back. And that's when the healing process really started, because I'd had 4 months behind me with mostly just sitting, waiting, trying to heal, trying to do everything under the sun to get better. And then from there, I kind of got thrust into a position where I had to wrestle because I was at the Ring of Honor taping that weekend. As soon as I got back, from China, and that's when the opportunity came for me and Luchasaurus. And it always been, as long as when I started wrestling, there was 2 places that I always wanted to wrestle outside of Japan, was PWG and Ring of Honor. So
Sure.
when Ring of Honor finally gave me the chance, I didn't care. I didn't care about what was wrong. It was my one opportunity to get on that stage, which I thought I would never get. And we wound up having a pretty good match, despite everything. Like going into it mentally, I was not prepared. Definitely not prepared. Like my mindset going into it was all wrong. But that said, we still pulled off a pretty good match. And then from there, Joe seen that I had that match, so it became, oh, can you do this show? I was, yeah, sure, all right, because I didn't have any more excuses. So it would just became, all right, do this next show, do that next show, do that next show, and in between, just kind of literally just sit in a room and wait and just hope that things were getting better. But as I kept doing that, and I was also going out and doing wrestling for wrestling in California, my shoulder wasn't being an issue. The pain was subsiding, things were getting better. I was finding myself back in the gym. So from there, it just slowly but surely, like, okay, it's not great, but I'm okay. I'm okay, and I can move forward. And that's just what I've done ever since.
Joe, what kind of impression does that make on you when you see guys who are willing to really just bite that bullet and tough it up and go in there and work through something that is as nagging as a shoulder injury. I know I've had shoulder problems for 20 years now from being in the ring and hurting my shoulder. Is that something that you see as a positive light, or are you very cautious with, guys who want to rush back in, either having just had an injury or still have an injury?
Well, it goes both ways. As a promoter, you you look at Cody, for example, you look at Chris Bay, you look at Greg. They have so much passion that they don't want to miss on the shows. But as an individual who knows these people, likes these people, and I've never wrestled. So I'm looking at it as, hey, maybe it's better to take 2 or 3 extra weeks off because there's still so much more ahead than worrying about one show or 2 shows. But you have to understand, it's also how injured are you? You know what I mean? If you're really injured and I remember before Greg had a major injury to his shoulder before, a few years back, and he was gone for a while then. And it's like, it's great that these guys want to wrestle injured, but sometimes you gotta weigh both options, and you have to say, you know what, things can be moved. Like, for example, if we have Remy Marcel versus Hyperstreak for the Nevada State title tournament next week, and Greg gets fucked up, I would rather postpone the match for 2 or 3 weeks. Or if he's wrestling, especially in a random 5-way, 4-way, not a lot going on, hey, take a break. We have so much talent. It's easy to say, hey, take a couple shows off, because we got to move and mix and match, because Greg will tell you about the 12 match cards that, he's been a part of with, an 8-man tag, a 6-way, and a 4-way, and there's 42 motherfuckers on the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've tried to trim that down, and it's like our talent pool is as good as it's ever been. There's no doubt in my mind, the guys that we have coming through the doors, and especially it's mainly because of the young local talent, the Suavecitos and Adriel and Laz. And now we have a women's division where you got Maz and Lacey and Cassandra, and you got Estrella, and as he said, Alice Blair. It was like, I remember people like Remy were like, hey, what about putting her on a show? And I'm like, I don't know, man. She's really quiet. I don't see very much, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, she's ready, man. She's ready. And it's the same thing with Dana Lynn, who's only 16. It was like, we're giving these people opportunities, and, it's hit or miss. You're brand new. You get nervous, whatever. You're not going to have good matches all the time.
Right.
But it's crazy that a lot of these young people have come in and made things very difficult, because it's like, wow, they did really well. How do you not put that person on the next show? And it's like, they need to get experience. They need to get out there, be seen in front of people. And especially the way things are now, shows are far and few in between. So you're trying to make sure you're getting the locals that once they're ready, you got to give them that opportunity. Sometimes that opportunity is to get their ass beat in a minute, like one of our younger kids, Nick Zander. And Nick's a guy who was a fan. I didn't realize it till after he signed up. All of a sudden, it was like, this guy bought tickets. He was at the Mecca. He's come to a bunch of shows for a few years, but he started training with us, and within 3 months, he was ahead of the guys who've been there for 6 months, or at least equal to. And he's there all the time. He's always helping. It's a guy that you have to give an opportunity to because he deserves it and he earned it, and he's gone out there and he's done a phenomenal job. And it's so many out there. It's just like, it's so disappointing that we just can't be running, because we felt right now we're in a position where we can run a show every week, whether it's a women's show one week, a high octane type show, a future shock. We have these opportunities because of our fan base, and especially with the limits, 50 to 100 people, whatever it's going to be, that we can put the maximum amount of people and run every single week. That's how much talent we have.
Right. And for you, Greg, you know, speaking of these matches, and I've seen a handful of you in, you know, 4 ways, 6 ways, you know,
But he did get a one-on-one with Paul London. So
8 years ago, Joe. 8 years.
oh, does that not count?
Thank you. Thank you. No, I'm sorry. Thank you. You're right. Thank you.
uh, so what stands out for you when you get these opportunities, and let's say there's not necessarily an angle going in, it's more so to get you and to get other people on the card. How do you approach that into going into matches like that? And is there a certain match that sticks out in your mind, that you absolutely enjoyed being a part of, even though it, you know, might have been a lot of bodies, it was still, you know, one of your favorite matches to do?
Oh man, those matches, they're challenging, like you were saying, because there are so many people in them, and you're trying to think, okay, how can I stand out, but how can we make this match good? How can we stick to our times? How are we fitting into the rest of this card? And there's just a lot to go into that. Not to mention, like, what other characters do we have? And we say that those matches don't have story, but typically they have at least an inkling of a story, like so and so you win so that they can go on to do this. So you need to have, you have this much time and you have this many people, and so and so has to do this. And by the way, try to make yourself stand out. So that's always what you want to think of going into it. And for me, with my character, I always try to at least get my character across, as opposed to just going in there and doing moves. Because while I am athletic, I don't think I'm the most athletic. So for me, being myself is much more important than jumping off of something or trying to do the most spectacular move. That said, man, we've had so many of those matches. It's honestly harder for me to like think of one. I have become really proficient at triple threats though. So a lot of people shy away from triple threats, and a lot of people don't like triple threats. I've had a couple of my matches that are my best matches that are triple threats.
Sure.
Unfortunately, they weren't in FSW. So if you were to ask me, like, what multi-man matches would be my favorite, myself and Tommy Misfit, as he was at the time, and another guy who wrestled for us for a while. Mind you, this was in 2013, so unfortunately I forgot his name. Tristan.
Kaali'i?
Yeah, Tristan Kaali'i. Thank you, Joe. It was myself, Tristan Kaali'i, and Tommy Misfit or Thomas Day, and that was in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And I think it was a match that at the time, like, the three of us were kind of all just guys who were there. We just kind of filled part of the card. So it was kind of a whatever match, and I think it was so that one of us could go on to be in the red carpet. It was the last. Like, you guys lost all these other matches, so we'll put you in. Somebody got to win. And that match actually came off really incredible and showed a lot of people what we were doing. Aside from that, I had another match in Ireland for OTT, actually. It was myself, LJ Cleary, and Scotty Davis, who at the time I believe were both under 18 years old, and I wasn't aware of this at the time. And this is back in 2017, and at the time, I was still very, very new to Ireland. Those were two guys that were on the come up that people were looking at. But we went out there and we had this really incredible match that people out there are still talking about. And I'm
Wow.
really honored by that. I was like, wow, I didn't know that I had made such an impression. I didn't know that we could make such an impression. Since then, both those guys are actually really couple of the biggest young stars in Ireland. And I really love going back and forth to there as much as possible. But those would be some of my favorite multi-man matches that I've had.
You know, Joe, you kind of have a reputation for multi-man matches and having, you know, a really good sense of getting guys on the card. So, you know, they get that either experience or, you know, get a little exposure to the fans. What for you is your favorite of all these, you know, crazy multi-man matches? What's your favorite to watch as a fan?
What is my favorite? What, three-way, four-way?
Like what, yeah, what, I mean, what is your, do you like the three ways better? Do you like four ways better? Do you like, you know, handicaps? What is your favorite style of multi person matches?
I would have to say a four-way match because of the fact that there's, off the top of my head, you know, I remember when I was putting together the IWF and we were putting together the show and we wanted to open the show with something that would be like, man, this should be sick. We need something that's going to go. So at the time, a lot of them worked PWG, but they weren't really known on the West Coast. So the decision was made that we were going to open the show with a four-way, and it was going to be Ricochet, Rich Swann, AR Fox, and an East Coast guy named JT Dunn. And JT Dunn was, you know, he was more of the tweener guy. He was more of the physical guy in the group. And then we had, oh no, I'm sorry. It wasn't Ricochet. I believe it was Tony Nese.
Okay.
In the match. But what it came down to was also Rich Swann and AR Fox. And there was really no, you're a heel, you're a face. Everybody liked Rich Swann. Rich Swann came out. He had this energy about him. He had this charisma. People quickly adapted to him. And I remember watching AR Fox, who I knew of, not a big fan, but he stepped into the heel role and did it magnificently. And that four-way match was one of the best opening matches on a show to this day that I've ever seen. And the reason I liked that four-way is I'm a fan of that X Division, no limits type of style. But what I really hate about it in those singles matches when I'm watching PWG and Ring of Honor, it's like big move, kick out, big move, kick out, big move. And I hate that. It just takes away from me as a fan to like watch everybody just no sell everything.
Yeah.
But four-way, the big move is broken up by another guy because one pinfall wins. If it's an elimination match, why would you break it up? So I was always a fan of the four-way where one pinfall wins. When we're doing tournaments, I like the idea of a four-way to where it's an elimination style. That way the other two guys, it isn't like, hey, we got a championship four-way match. I don't even lose, but I didn't win.
Right.
So I've had a lot more fun with four-ways. We've even, you know, done it as the battle of the bruiserweights. And I remember in Mesquite, we had a real good one with Tito Escondido and Alcatraz and Brian Cage. And I can't remember who the fourth guy was, but you know, the four-way's always been my go-to, I guess you could say.
You know, Greg, when you think about something Joe said here, and that is the use of now no sell essentially. Um, what is it for you in terms of balancing out as a performer and also as a mentor trainer, that idea of, you know, when 30 super kicks is just like too much? Like, how do you take the younger generation and say, listen, guys, it's fucking cool, but at the same time, you're still telling a story and you still have to keep that that idea of reality in terms of, man, if you get your head kicked off, you know, you shouldn't just jump right back off and then kick someone else, you know, right back in the head. Is that something that's frustrating to you? Is that something that young people are open to listening to you about, and how to, you know, utilize their moves inside of telling that story in a match?
No, it never frustrates me because I've come to the understanding that there's just different flavors for everybody. Some people like a PWG, some people like an AEW, some people like a New Japan or WWE, so on and so forth. So no one's wrong. And if you're making money, if you're getting over, you're succeeding, who am I to say like, you shouldn't do such things? Like professional wrestling, there is no one way, you know what I mean? There's
Sure.
so many different vast things. And I believe that pro wrestling is like a circus. So you have your strongmen, you have your clowns, you have your you have your top rope acts, you have your lion tamers, your dancers, whatever it might be. So to me, I like a show that has a lot under the sun. So everyone has something to pick up on. So maybe you're not so much into the strongman, but you love the clowns, or maybe you don't like the clowns, but you love the lion tamers or the top rope act. Um, as for people like the younger generation listening, a lot of people are open. And I've always really enjoyed that at FSW. We've always been very character based.
Yeah.
We really like we want to drive home your foundation, your basics, how to roll, how to bump, how to sell, everything like that. But we really put an influence more less on the moves and more on who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And we've created a lot of great characters since then. And we've also had a lot of people who come through, and maybe it's a changing of the guard where people aren't so consumed with like, oh, I have to throw a super kick or I have to do a 450. I met a lot of people who, oh yeah, I love 80s wrestling, and I love Ric Flair, and I love Macho Man, and I love this character, and they want to create more character than want to create moves. But then you will have your people who are super athletes and they can just do whatever, you know.
Right.
And we want to be able to give way to everyone. And whatever your style is, we want to work upon it. I'm never going to try and drive someone my way. You're not going to be your best you if I'm trying to tell you how to be you. Only you can be you. And I just want to try and help you be the best you that you can be, you know? So if you are that dude who needs to throw 30 super kicks, all right, well, let's maybe figure out when, why, and how, as opposed to just go out there and do whatever. And if you are a character-based person, okay, let's work on your character. If you're more of a mat technician, okay, let's work on that. If you want to do lucha libre, okay, we can do that. Whatever you want to do, whatever is true to you, we're going to, at least for me, I'm going to do my best to try to pull that out of you as best as I can and try to lead you in ways to make that work. As far as the no selling stuff is, it depends on where you are, man. Are you working PWG and they're gonna pop for that and you're gonna sell 30 t-shirts? Well, go do what you gotta do.
Right, right. I'm not going to say, oh, that's outrageous. They did the slow motion spot. You know what? It worked there.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it'll work where I am, and that doesn't mean I'm right. You know, there's certain characters and gimmicks. You know, when I was working in the strip clubs, I don't know if I made it up or somebody made it up, but it was, if yours, I'm the DJ. If I'm playing the music and I'm not pissing somebody off, then I'm not doing a good job. So it's the same thing in putting together a wrestling show. You need to piss off somebody because there's no way that everybody is going to like everything you do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? Who likes the hip hop? Who liked the rock? Who liked this? Somebody's going to be like, oh, that DJ sucks. You know, it's the same thing. It's like, you know, there was characters that, you know, I remember Luke Hawks is like, oh, I got to talk to you about, not talk to us. He did the seminar, and he was a guy who was like, there's one guy that you use that I got to bitch about, and it was Santana Jackson. Okay. And it was like, well, other than the fact that he never trained enough and the other stuff, he found a little niche that I think could have been hugely popular. Unfortunately, he didn't put in the time and effort and kind of fell by the wayside. And as Greg alluded to early on, if you're not looking to make yourself better, I'm not just putting somebody on because I think somebody liked the gimmick. You know, he did some stuff that was super cool, but if he's working a 7-minute match, there's only so many Michael Jackson spots you're going to do. What about the regular part of the wrestling show and locking up and actually looking like you know what you're doing? And that's important. You know, we try to have the comedy guy, the high flyer, the Hammerstone type, the killer like Cross. You know, the one thing about FSW that it's always been, as he said, is character driven. You know, people, and it's hard because you got guys that were kind of heels, tweeners, Remy Marcel, who kind of adapted a new character, but all the longtime fans love him. So there's nothing he can do.
Right.
But you also have guys like the Unguided who people thought, hey, that's the cool new team. They're cool. You know, we like them. And then we put him in with Jacob Austin Young and Cody, and they wrestled Death Proof, and they remembered why they loved Death Proof. And now all of a sudden we got what we needed, them against the Unguided, that people were against this team that are supposed to be heels. Because the bottom line is there's got to be a reason. You know, I remember back in the day when Sin Bodhi was doing the Freak Show, and it was like, okay, we're going to have the banana wrestle the fucking apple. And it's like, the bottom line in that is, if you're a fan watching, there's got to be a reason why you're rooting for the banana or rooting for the apple. And in that match, there's nothing there. You know, it's not going to be a Matt Classic, a guy wrestling in a banana suit against a guy wrestling in an apple suit. So if there's no story behind it, you're just trying to waste time. It's kind of like when I watch WWE. It's just wasting time to get to the next show, to get to the next show, to get to the pay-per-view, to where after I burn you in the pay-per-view and murder you by lighting you on fire, you get to come back the next show. You know, and I get it's entertainment supposedly, but at least back in the day, if I had a feud with you and in the pay-per-view I beat you, you didn't show up the next day on Raw, and we continued the feud for 3 more months.
Right.
You know, that was a big deal when it was Jake the Snake and ravishing Rick Rude, and he kissed Jake the Snake's wife, and then they had the blow off. Imagine if they had the blow off and then the next day they fought again, and then they fought again. Who would give a fuck?
Yeah.
Nobody. And that's what we try to do. You know, we ran limited shows. I always hear, you know, the ex-champions always joke and yap like, hey, you know, I never got my rematch. And it's like, well, we're not Monday Night Raw and run 5 house shows. We just seen you lose in a steel cage match to the new heavyweight champion. That kind of ends it. Now we move on to other things because we're in a position where we have to move on. We have a local fan base. We have a lot of the same local guys that have been there for years, yet we're still able to mix and match and see so many fresh things because you got new faces. You got, you know, Remy Marcel and Gregory Sharp or Hyperstreak. How many times has that actually happened, Greg?
It actually has never happened.
There you go. And now these are 2 guys that have been here for the last 9 or 10 years. You know, whether it was, well, Greg was in a tag team when Remy was a singles guy. And then Remy and Manly, the Whirlwind Gentlemen, were in a tag team for a lot of years when Greg was a singles guy. So and the two never met. So it's amazing to see that there's a bunch of guys that have been around 8, 9, 10 years that they've never wrestled each other. So this is a fresh matchup that people are looking forward to. You know, we were hoping that the TV stuff would help catapult it to where people really could get into and pay attention to the feud. But now it's like everything's in a holding pattern and the TV's ready to go, whether we do it on Twitch, whether we do it on MyLV TV, whatever it is. Hopefully we can save that match, because initially we were talking about the finals being held on Primetime Live. And before they decided they weren't going to continue Primetime Live, we had numerous discussions about trying to do it in front of our home fans, because we felt it would be a better match for our hometown fans compared to an empty arena, right. You know? But it's also, hey, we really love to have that match as one of the key matches at No Escape, where we'll have our 3 cage matches, and we would put together our first monster card of the year. But again, we're not going to be at Sam's Town till who knows when. So, you know, what do? You know, we're looking at doing No Escape inside the FSW arena if we can at least get 50 to 100 fans.
Right.
Every match inside the steel cage, brother.
Oh, boy.
Who doesn't want to see Dynamite Damon versus Brandon G inside the steel cage?
Brandon G. Brandon G does not want that match. He's like, no, I'm not ready. I'm but a boy.
Hey, Cody had a dog collar match, his 6th match of his career.
Yeah, but that was VCW, so we can't count that.
Yeah, I get it. And it was Bryce Slavin, but, you know, it is what it is.
That being said, shout out to Legacy.
Shout out. We love Legacy. Need to get Legacy on the show. That'll be a good show.
Oh, man, I hope so. Talk about Las Vegas legends. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to work on that one. So as we kind of start wrapping a little bit,
we got another hour to talk.
So let's get into a little bit of where you took your career from being Greg to being Hyperstreak. What was your thought process and what brought everything about?
I really wanted to have more of a character, because prior to, depending on the situation, like I was in the agency, but prior to that, Gregory Sharp didn't have much backing him. There was nothing really. Gregory Sharp was just kind of a guy, like, oh, I'm a wrestler. Hey, I'm Gregory Sharp. I want the title or whatever it might be today. So I wanted to do something that was close to me, something that I felt akin to. So I'd always been an anime fan. I'd always been kind of a nerd. So I wanted to do something that was, if you feel an outsider, if you feel yourself like a nerd, if you feel yourself like not fitting into a regular community or anything like that, then I wanted to be the guy for you. So I put on the flashy colors, I put on the mask, especially I had always loved Lucha Libre. I wanted to do something closer to that. So that's kind of what gave way to Hyperstreak. And since then, it's not always been perfect, but I always wanted to do something, because I saw a lot of people who their gimmick is like, oh, this is my favorite thing when I was 12. And that's cool and all, but it's also, okay, well, your gimmick can't be something that's already been done. Like, make up something, like make up a character, make something. But it's always like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to cosplay as this thing, or I'm just going to like make some kind of reference to this thing. I wanted to make something that had that backing behind it, but was me, or something that I made. So whether you like it, you don't like it, whether you care about it at all, at least it's me. At least something that I created, as opposed to just, oh, well, this is a reference to this. It's like, well, if I don't care about that, then I don't care about you. So what are you going to do? But then I guess in a way, even what I do kind of falls into that. And it's just been figuring out how to make that work and how to get that across to people.
So, Joe, what for you, when you have someone that has wrestled with you guys for a long time and now wants to undertake a character change, wants to spice things up, what kind of say do you have in it? And what kind of, let's say, Greg comes to you, I'm now going to be hyper streak. You see the character and you don't think highly of the character. Do you actually, tell the wrestler, hey, I've given you a shot, for a couple shows and the character's just not going anywhere. What's your thought process on guys changing characters?
My thought process is, you need to be an extension of yourself. In all honesty, the Gregory Sharp character, whether it was a combination of being in, being out, being in, being out, he was just another guy on the roster. Now, he was a good guy on the roster. He wrestled very well. He worked with others very well. So he's a guy that I'm going to give an opportunity. If he's looking to do something different, I'm generally going to be open to it. Now, if it's utterly horrendous, like if he said, hey, I got this idea, I want to come out in a cow suit, do something, I'd probably be like, well, you better get your head examined.
Well, hold on, Joe. Like, let's talk about the cow suit idea.
That could be something down the line, a new tag team partner. Now that
it could be utterly ridiculous.
What's that?
It could be. I could have a tag team partner, and he could be ridiculous, and I have the cow suit, so we're utterly ridiculous.
That's right. There you go. And he has to have filters, and you milk him before the match. There could be money there. But the thing is, it's like you need to give opportunities. I always talk about, Tommy Danger transformed into Sugar Brown. Well, Tommy Danger was nothing. He was MVP light. That was my nickname for him, And Sugar Brown, I assisted in trying to come up with different ideas to enhance it. In some cases that happens. In some cases it doesn't happen. Most guys create their own ideas. Unfortunately, a lot of guys create the ideas based off when they were 12 or 13 years old and said, I want to be a wrestler. So all of a sudden, 7 years later, they become a wrestler, and the character they created at 12 or 13 is nowhere near as cool as they thought it was going to be when they actually wrestled. So people have to go through that growing process, and people will grow. Just because a guy's good in 2 years, like an Ice Williams or a Chris Bay, 95% of people are still a long way to go when they're 2 or 3 years into the business. And you're learning yourself, you're learning your personalities, and you're learning your characters. So, who am I to say, oh, that's not going to work? Like, I need people to go out there and do what they feel they're comfortable with. Sometimes there's guys that I feel they're doing nothing, and it's like, hey, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should try that. But Greg's always had a creative mind. He's always been good in the ring. He's always been a guy that if I needed somebody, he was there to help. I remember last week's, with Kenny King not being able to be there. Hey, Greg, can you cover? Yeah, I'll be there. And, when you can count on certain people to do things, it's a little easier to give them more leeway. A while back, there was, I guess you could say, a lot of miscommunication going on with me and Greg. And I hadn't seen him for a while. And he made a post off one of my posts that I didn't really take offense to, but it was important to him. And we didn't really talk at all. So I got irritated with him. He got irritated with me. I'm in Smith's grocery store, and I walk in, and I haven't seen Greg because it's the pandemic, so he hasn't been around for a few months. And all of a sudden I see him, And I made a comment to him, what are you in hiding? And he's like, I've been really busy. And he walked right past me. And I thought, wow, that's really fucking weird. And I remember telling Remy Marcel, and I know and then Remy tried to be the peacemaker, and he talked to Greg, and he talked to me, and I told him what I thought, and Greg told him what he thought. And then we had a sit down, and, a lot of things came out, situations arise. Greg being such a good guy, always being a helpful dude, a lot of times you take that for granted. So Greg feels he's not being appreciated, when I always say to everybody, boy, if you guys, the assistant trainers, if you all could be like Gregory Sharp, it'd be a much better place to be. And me putting him over to everybody else was great, but never putting him over, I guess, to himself and tell him how much I appreciate it. You learn things from situations, just like when the other company started and people left. When people came back, there was a newfound appreciation on both sides. And, Greg had a feeling of, hey, you know what? I do whatever you need me to do, put over who you want me to put over. I work with the younger guys. You say I do a great job with it, but sometimes you need to be selfish in this business. The Suavecitos want to be tag team champions, and they don't hide it, and they've only wrestled 10 matches at the time. But you listen to it and you hear it. When you don't hear anything from Greg, it's kind of out of mind, out of sight. Like, you're always going to put him on the show. You're always going to be there. And he was also in a situation where he'll tell you he left a lot. He came back, he left. So it was hard to get him into a situation. And then we tried to, when we put him and Eli Quick together, we saw them have some matches. They looked kind of good together. Hey, let's get this going. Then there was an injury. Then there was something else going on. And then Eli ended up not wrestling anymore. And unfortunately, that was another opportunity that fell by the wayside. And it's nobody's fault. And after that conversation, things were thought about differently, because here is a guy who has been with us for 9 years. Here's a guy who is, been FSW tried and true. I remember when he had left, he came back. We were talking about the issues with the other training facility when 3PW started up and everybody left. Greg's always been the guy, work together, see if you can work together. He's never the guy who's like, oh, fuck that motherfucker, he's a piece of shit. He has on some occasions about certain people, but
they were actually motherfuckers, and we all know.
And pieces of shit. So by listening, it made me put in a little bit more of an effort to let's see what we can do with a guy who can wrestle really well, and he has a character that's extremely popular. And sometimes, because he's such a good hand, it goes to the time when I told Nick Bugatti, it's hard to take you out of that jobber role because you do such a good job. It's not meant disrespectfully. It's meant, wow, who am I going to get to replace Nick in making all these other guys look good? Because Nick did such a good job doing it that it's hard to take him out and give him the push that he deserves, because he's doing such a good job the other way. And eventually you see that. And, right now I think we're in a good situation. We had talked about different things with the Hyper Street character, but right now things are looking good. And, like I said, other than the time frame of making everything so delayed, that's one of the more exciting things going on. It's a good story with Remy and Hyper Streak, first time singles matchup ever. And there's a lot on the line.
And going off of what Joe was saying about like the miscommunication and stuff like that, there was definitely a lot of miscommunication, just like Joe was saying. And it doesn't really matter the relationship, because every relationship goes through with strains, whether it's your mom, your best friend, your girlfriend, significant other, whatever, your promoter. It just became a point where things were not being said that should have been said. And once me and Joe got to be in that room and talk to each other, we realized there was no problem. Like, he didn't have a problem with me, and I don't have a problem with him. It was just shit that didn't get said. And once it did get said, then, oh, okay, well, what the hell are we talking about? What are we going back and forth about? We're all good. And we just got to be able to be on that same page. Just like he was saying with the 3PW stuff. I remember that time where a lot of guys left because, like, I think a lot of that miscommunication was there as well. People don't. Wrestling is hard, man. We all want to do something, and Joe has his ideas. I have my ideas. You have your ideas, and it's just coming together and making everything work. But we all have to be under the understanding that we have to work with Joe, and it's really what Joe wants, and you have to work within that. You can have your say, but you also have to work within what Joe wants. And Joe's always been a good dude, and he's always made a lot of things happen. Where, like, Las Vegas didn't have pro wrestling before Joe DeFalco, and Las Vegas would not have pro wrestling if it weren't for FSW and the work that he's put in and the work that we put in as well. And we have to understand that it's a give and take. All of us have to work together. And Joe, for a lot of us as wrestlers, for years we didn't understand that. And it was a sit down that I had with Remy Marcel that really made me see the other side of things, see things as best I could from Joe's perspective as a promoter, and having to deal with all these guys and having to have the stress of running FSW and making money and selling tickets and bringing people in and managing everything that's going on. And I think I saw that a lot. And I just wanted to be someone that helped out and not someone who was always like, hey man, what about me? What about me? What about me? But just like Joe was saying, there has to be that selfishness. There has to be that, oh, what about me? There has to be. Otherwise, you do just kind of get forgotten about, because especially in this time, there's been this explosion of talent from right here at home and from California, from Arizona. We have so many incredible, talented guys, and they're within 4 or 5 hours, and we have so many talented guys that are right here. We have people that are now on television, and they started first day in that ring with us. So you just we had to find a way to come together. Going back to the 3PW stuff, I remember that time and really having to be there for the company, because at the time the school had no one. All of our best trainers, a lot of our best wrestlers had gone. Mike Modest was on his way out. He didn't care anymore. So I felt it was my opportunity to really step up and try to help out the school, because I remember showing up to the school and the students were like, who's training today? Who's training today? I was like, oh, well, I guess I am, because
I think it's Looney Bin. Looney Bin's training.
Oh God, yeah, no, let's not talk about that. And then to me, that was the darkest times of FSW, when they're like, a lot of our longtime people had gone away, and we just really needed guys like myself, like Jacob Austin Young, to kind of hold down the fort, because I never said a bad word towards 3PW, but I knew from watching Joe, what it took to be a promoter and what it took to stay in the wrestling business. And I took one look at this other guy, and I was like, man, you're not going to stick around. Like, this business is not for you. You're not going to handle it. And sure enough, within that year, he was gone. And I had to, but I was really happy that I made the choice that I did and stuck with FSW, because say what you will, Joe's been there through thick and thin, and there's been a lot of thin. So that's just how wrestling is. But Joe loves this, like I love this, and maybe we see it differently, but the love for professional wrestling and the want and desire to make pro wrestling happen here for us is the same. So no matter what, we're going to fall back onto the same page eventually, because we want to make this thing happen.
Do you think when it comes to you wrestling, in other states, other promotions, what is it that relationship that you have with Joe, does that carry over so that you can understand the perspective of whoever the promoter is in another company to what you need to do on that show, since you're obviously, you're coming in, you're not
Right,
right hand man. Is
right.
that Does that help you in understanding and at least knowing, you know, that difference between having to look out for yourself, but also having to look out for what you're being asked to do?
that in my experience, and I think like when I go to a new place, like that is something that I bring to the table. You always have to look at like what do you bring to the table, and for me, it's that experience of a lot of guys will just go out there and like, oh, it's time for me to go out there and do my thing and not really care about anything else. But me, I have the understanding of I see what the card has, I see what the card is lacking, I know what the promoter wants, or I have an idea what the promoter wants. I don't need to go. I'm not some green guy who's like 6 months in who needs to go ask the promoter a million questions. What's my time? Who am I wrestling? Is there anything that you specifically want? Cool.
Yep.
All right. I can work on from there. And then that to me, like that's a weight off of their shoulders. There's one less match that they have to worry about because you're getting a really professional to be in there to work with whoever it might be, whether they're 3 months in or 10 years in, been on television or don't know anything at all, never been outside their own state. And I get to just kind of go in there and be a professional because like a lot of the guys, they, like I said, they're just kind of selfish, looking out for themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. They're just inexperienced. They don't know any better than that. They're not bad people. They're not bad wrestlers. They maybe just don't have that open of a mind. They've never had that perspective. For me, having worked so closely with Joe, having been in FSW for so long, and having been an independent wrestler for so long, but I also have learned that through working with Jesse. I've learned that through working with Luke Hawks down in New Orleans. I learned that on the British cast because we would spend so much time with the Knight family, and you get to see like all the stuff that they have to do in order to make things happen.
Right.
So for me, it's always okay. I can show up to any show, any card in the world, and I can figure out very quickly and very easily what I need to do on bare bones basics, and I can make something really incredible out of it. And that's what makes me a professional.
Joe, what if it's one or if there's multiple, your favorite Hyper Streak or Greg matches?
Well, I think the one with Paul London for sure, because, before that, Bryce Harrison got the opportunity to wrestle Paul.
Okay.
And, the very first match Bryce and Paul had, you could tell who the name superstar guy was and who was the local star. And
Sure.
I've always been one for, I'm not bringing in a big name guy just so they could put over our younger talent. You know what I mean? And watching that first match with Bryce, you could tell that it was a different level. As time progressed and Bryce, who became one of the best characters we had in FSW, they wrestled the second time. And if you were just watching and didn't know who anybody was, I'm certain you couldn't tell who was the name superstar and who was the local guy. Greg only had one opportunity, and he had one opportunity at Silverton to wrestle Paul London, and he didn't miss a beat. He stepped up and he had a fantastic match. And whether it was the years, and at that time it probably wasn't very many years of him traveling all over the place, but he was confident enough of his ability. I felt he would be the right guy to have the match that I wanted to see with Paul London. And, he delivered on all parts. And my second favorite match was not only it was the match, it was the entire story where Brandon Gatson was the No Limits champion. And we were debating, it's like, wow, Brandon Gatson and Gregory Sharp in the main event of a casino show. But we were in the process of, Bryce had left to go to Washington to delve into politics, and he was making his return, and we had a huge, show closing event. And for the time the match happened, you know, him and Gatson killed it, you know, and it led into the story that was the rebirth. But it was actually the birth of the following, because before it was just Bryce and Jacob Austin Young, but then we added Cody and we had Big Duke, and then later we added Shelly. So that whole final segment is to this day still one of my favorite FSW moments.
And same question for you, Greg. Is there, you know, anything that stands out to you
Oh wait,
as
before he answers,
sure.
you know, the match he had with Maniacal, I'll tell you what, that will go down in the books.
Oh, it will go down in a book.
In a book.
In a book. Anyway, I'm sorry. What were you saying? Were you asking Matt? Excuse me.
I was asking what you maybe some of your favorite matches or favorite spots were, but give us a little insight into the Maniacal story.
Oh, I don't even remember. Maniacal was just a character that he was a character that was on the show, and I'll leave it at that. As far as moments and matches, the Paul London match was a very important match for me. Growing up, Paul London was one of my guys, one of my absolute favorites. So to have been given that opportunity, I took it very seriously, and it was just a dream come true that that match went off the way that I did, and that we just fired on all cylinders and just met and meshed perfectly. Because prior to that, I probably talked to Paul a couple times, but we had never touched or anything like that. So that was all right there in that moment. The moment that Joe speaks of me and Brandon Gatson and the birth of the following, as it was a really special moment to be a part of. Even though I was kind of on the bottom of that moment, it was definitely a very important moment in the history of FSW for sure. Since then, last year, I had a really incredible, I had a very special match with Douglas James at the Beers and Body Slams. To me, that was the most passionate match that I've had in a long time, because prior to they had that tournament to what was I forgot
The Limitless one?
Yes, the Limitless tournament, where I happened to be in Ireland at the start of that tournament, so I just happened to miss the tournament entirely. So I kind of took my personal feelings about that and put them all into that match with Douglas James, and I think we really got the best out of it in that match. From there, had a really fun six-man tag with me and Sky High versus Laz. I want to say Adriel. I honestly don't remember.
And maybe Braxton or something?
What's that?
Was it Braxton?
No. Braxton was definitely not in the match. I want to say it was Laz and tag team. I can't remember. But I remember I really enjoyed that match. I think it was Suavecitos, now that I think of it. It was me and Sky High versus Suavecitos and Laz, and that turned out to be a really fun match. Before the breakup and everything, it was Hyper Quick versus Adriel and Jay Vidal. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm forgetting names left and right. That was on a student showcase or a Future Shock. It was just a very kind of random match that got put together, but we actually went in there and had a lot of fun, and that turned out to be a really, really fun match. I used back in the 2013-2012 days, I had a series of matches, or just a couple of matches with Jack Manley. They're some of my favorites. We had one at Silverton that was really incredible, but the one that I enjoyed the most was probably the one at the Boulder Highway School. Yeah, those were some of my favorite matches that I've had to date in FSW.
You know, for a short time, we were only at the old school for 3 years. There's a lot of great memories from that place.
Yeah. And moving over to the new place on Harrison, honestly, we all kind of walked in and we're like, oh, this is it. It's all over, because the place on Boulder was so big. And then walking into Harrison was like, oh man, this is like a garage in comparison to what we had. Like, we have a real deal. And then, but like, it's not where it is. It's what you make of it. And
Right.
we made that place our home, and we've made a ton of so many important moments and memories in that place, and we've made that place the capital of pro wrestling outside of Samstown, as far as Las Vegas is concerned.
Joe, are there any stories about Greg that stand out to you? Any, moments that you guys have had? Anything that could be a funny moment, or anything that sticks out in your memory about something that you've experienced together?
Well, the number one was what I already talked about, was the issue and walking into him at Smith's time.
We're living this down, I guess.
You know, other than that, everything we've ever discussed, I always thought we got along really, really well. He was always really, really helpful, you know. And then the other story was like, dude, you're gonna get killed hitchhiking down in Alabama and Arkansas, like that. I remember sitting in the office telling him that, and it was like, you're crazy. And he ended up, I think, going even longer than he expected to. He first said, yeah, I'm going to probably go around for about a year. And I think it was way longer than that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was about 4 years. The only thing that really stopped me was, China stopped me a lot because I got involved with OWB. So we just became back and forth to China all the time. So there was really no time for it. But also at the time, I was kind of getting burnt out, and I wanted to switch directions a little bit and be a little bit more focused on something, because I realized, like, oh, I can't do anything great because I'm doing so many things all at the same time. So maybe if I just focused on being in FSW or being in California or something, then I could really make something out of myself, make something out of that, as opposed to just, oh, I'm going to go here and I'm going to go there. But traveling the world is one of the main reasons that I became a pro wrestler. So to live out my dream and be able to travel, and I'm still not done. Hopefully the pandemic ends at some point and I do get to travel some more. And I feel like that's really made me a better wrestler and maybe a better teacher, because I have so much more to say. I have so much more to give that I've taken from some of the best wrestlers in the world, and I'm able to pull that all together and then bring it back to the school. So now all these people who are just here in Las Vegas, they're getting lessons from the UK or Mexico or Japan or something like that, or the PC, because I've been able to train with or work with someone who has that experience. So maybe you're not getting it firsthand, but you're having to go 20 minutes from where you live at most, and you're getting to have some kind of that experience because I'm able to give that back to you.
I do have a Gregory Sharp story that I almost forgot about.
Oh,
Early
no.
on in his training days, he had an incident with one of our later on top wrestlers, where I think things got a little wonky between the two. And I wasn't there for it, but everybody, that was the talk of the day. Sharp choked him out. We'll keep him nameless to protect the guilty.
Yeah, that's a true story. That's actually a thing that happened. Me and other so-called person or said person had a disagreement. That disagreement kind of went further. This person said something to me that I took very hard at the moment, and then decided to turn it back to me to walk away as if the moment was over. And I just kind of lost it in that moment. And the next thing I knew, I was choking him on the ground. So, yeah. But, you live, you learn, you grow, and it's all water under the bridge now.
And I'll give everybody a hint. It wasn't Eddie Guardado or Alexander Greywolf. So that'll narrow it down.
I'm glad you brought that up, because my next question was, do you think that Joe, watching Greg, as difficult as it is when a person is leaving and coming back, and leaving, coming back, do you see the difference in him as a person maturing from that experience of traveling, and not only getting life lessons but also getting various in the ring lessons as well. That's for you, Joe. Do you see the experience in Greg from his travels?
Well, yeah, because again, I always thought he was so much older than he really was, because the fact was he was so mature. You know, okay, I thought he was 19ish. Okay, 20 on 21. But like for years, I figured at that time he was at least 24, 25 years old with the experience. You know, you know, he was very respectful. He was intelligent. You know, he seemed to know his way around the world at a very young age. Now, whether that had to do with him living in California and then going to Louisiana and things like that and moving around a little bit, you know, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is the maturity level was always higher, because a lot of these young kids come in and they act like young kids. You know, Greg never acted like a young kid. You know, he acted like he was the big brother, like he was keeping people in line. Like you knew if you left the facility and he was in charge, there would be no shenanigans going on that I'm aware of. Now, you know, Greg may tell you different, that when I left, things got crazy, but I would think that they didn't.
No, it's about what are you saying. Yeah, I never really look at that at myself. Like I always look at myself as like messing around a lot, but I guess I could be considered like the fun uncle or something. Where yeah, we can mess around, but there's always a level of maturity or a level of like, hey, don't fuck around too much because you don't want to hurt yourself or break something. Like there's always, hey, think about this. Like don't do that because that's dumb and you could break something of yourself or of Joe, and somebody's got to pay for that. So please don't go putting holes in walls or throwing things around. Pick up after yourself or something like that.
Here's another quick Greg story. Okay, so we are at the facility, and we walk in, and there's a bunch of shit missing. Okay, so it turns out that Chris Bay left the door unlocked in the back. Okay, so somebody must have been checking doors. So in the middle of the night, they checked the doors and they took our equipment. They took speakers. Thankfully, they didn't take the projector because it was too high, or the amp, but they took our mixing board and some TV monitors and stuff like that. And I believe that Greg was running training that day. And Chris was throwing out the garbage and he never locked the door back. And after we found out all the stuff and what we needed to get to replace, Greg was offering money to pay for some of the stuff, you know, basically saying that even though I didn't do it, I'm responsible because I was running the class that day. And I wouldn't say out of 50 guys there that one or two others would have ever made that offer. Yeah. And obviously, you know, that just shows that his character is top notch, you know, and it was like, we knew financially he wasn't in a great position, but he still felt the need to make that offer to us. And, you know, that's another notch, you know, that when you talk about Gregory Sharp as a person, you know, the type of guy that he is.
Greg, any Joe DeFalco moments or stories that stick out for you in your memory?
Oh man, all of them. Joe DeFalco is actually the greatest character FSW's ever seen.
You're telling me I should be the champ, brother.
Oh, Joe DeFalco, brother. Oh man. Jesus Christ. Joe DeFalco talking about all of his quote unquote favorite talents. And I don't mean actual favorite talents, just the guys that he likes to throw under the bus on a daily basis. It's just so wildly entertaining. Like Joe said, we've always had a very good rapport. So whenever I come in it's very easy to lose an hour and a half just talking to Joe about this, that, the other, anything that just happens to be going on, or like, this fucking motherfucker said this. And it's just really entertaining to sit back and just listen to Joe just kind of go off on somebody. It's probably some of the best entertainment that I don't have to pay for.
I think we really do need to set up like a camera in your office, Joe, just to record the
Just me yelling at my kid is probably money right there.
Oh yeah, those are always good moments because we'll just be in training and then we'll just hear, wow, fucking Joey, what? Well, Dad, what? Or Joe, why'd you fucking?
I've been told to quiet it down, even in kids' class. They hear me yelling at my kid.
oh man. Oh man. That leads us to we're gonna have to have Joey on at some so that we can see the relationship.
Well, yeah, that could be the week I take off because I don't know how I've been in business for 11 years without him not running everything. Like the way that FSW has scraped by without Joey being involved in the first 5, 6, 7 years is just mind-boggling.
Also, Joey putting in his ideas for spots and like, oh, what if you did this? It's like, wait a minute, you've never done a spot in your life. Why are you telling me how to do spots?
He taught Chris Bay how to wrestle. Just ask him.
Well, he taught Chris Bay how to super kick for sure. It's his favorite move. Stand still for 5 seconds next to him. He'll probably throw one at you.
Oh no, all the time.
But then he's like, oh, well, I can't because my knee.
Yeah, his knee's he's had a bad knee for 5 years. Yet he does no athletic activities. Figure that out.
As now we finally hit that point where we have been talking with Joe for an hour and a half. As we do the final wrap here, let me ask you, Greg, where do you see yourself going at this point of your career? Do you have any ideas of where you want to see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Does do you have because you are someone who likes to explore new things in life, and not saying transitioning into another profession, but would you see yourself potentially being a coach, a booker, running a promotion? Is there any ideas or goals that you have that are down the line, not cutting you short, of your actual in-ring career, but just knowing that you're curious on things? Where do you see yourself going from here?
I mean, as far as like the in-ring is concerned, because to me, like that's always my driving force. I think one of the misconceptions that people have about me, or one of the things that we didn't communicate myself and Joe earlier, when we were talking about the miscommunications, was that like I still want this, man. That's one of the concepts people consider like, oh yeah, he's been around, yada yada. And sometimes it's hard for me, because and especially nowadays, you're seeing so many guys and women that are moving so quickly. They're advancing so quickly. They're like we talked about a Chris Bay or Ice Williams or Lacey Ryan, who just like that. They're on to bigger, better things, so to speak. And for someone who's been doing it for 11 years, like I still have so much that I want to accomplish. Like all the big things in wrestling that these other people accomplished, I'm always back right there applauding them. I'm always very happy for them. Genuinely, I really am happy to see each and every one of my friends succeed. I think I have a friend or at least someone that I've wrestled in every major company on here right now. But I still see myself doing something in Japan personally. But outside of like the in-ring stuff, I've always wanted to be a trainer. I think like no matter what, I want to help the next generation. I want to help people learn. I love teaching. I'm so passionate about it. it's one of the funnest things in the world to me to be able to come in and like teach somebody from the ground up or just show them something that they didn't know before. Like, oh, okay. And try to help them put the pieces together. Okay, well, maybe you could go this way. Try to get the best out of them that they have. Um, Having been in wrestling for so long, I know the highs and lows. So I am able to really help coach people when they're going through like the lows of wrestling and is this like going to work out or how am I going to do this or things just aren't working for me right now. It's like, okay, I understand that. I can really sympathize with that because I've been there before. So I think in all of those contexts, it makes me a really great trainer. Um, as far as like, I think nowadays we're seeing a lot of pro wrestlers that are running wrestling companies themselves. I was actually just working for one before the lockdown happened in Indiana. A friend of mine, Trip Cassidy, he was running Bizarro Lucha in Indiana.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really great show when you just get this different feeling. It's a younger vibe, it's a different vibe, and people there feel differently about what they're doing. And they feel a little bit more freer, they feel a little bit more relaxed. There's no like big brother or dad or principal coming down on them. It's their friend asking them to do something. So I've always wanted to do just a little something to give back to the guys and to give them a different environment. FSW is an incredible environment, but it's a bit professional. I would like to show them a different environment that's just fun. And like you can have fun in wrestling and you can loosen up and you can be yourself. And I think in those environments, you see so much personal growth that when you go back to a professional environment like an FSW or an Impact or something like that, you're more confident, you're more loose, you're more available, which makes you stand out more, makes you better. So I would really love to create an environment like that for myself, for other guys to go out there, okay, experiment, just have fun. Like put on you and do you as best you can because I'm not going to come back to you after the match and be like, well, you suck, so you're never going to wrestle here again. Ha ha ha. Like, no, all right, well, this worked, that worked, and we're going to make things better. But if it didn't work out and you bombed or whatever, but maybe you go out there and do something different and it's incredible. And now you're on to bigger and better things. Yeah, so that's what I would like to do as far as like not in the ring.
And Joe, my final question for you is: Would you see yourself as the, you got guys like Greg who are really great in terms of the school, along with all those other names we've talked about throughout the weeks. Did you ever consider seeing if FSW can actually become like a trade school, where this way you could have a curriculum to also offer, insight into production and these things that like Greg was talking about, you don't really sometimes know what you should be focusing on in terms of being someone trying to become a professional on the outside, in terms of how do I pay my bills, how do I get by doing this, how do I get bookings, where do I go for X, Y, and Z. Is this something that ever crossed your mind?
It's definitely crossed my mind, but with so much on the table, you know, we just ran a school, sure, but there's so
Right.
much more to it. You know, the main crux of what we do is a wrestling promotion. The school came about because of the wrestling promotion. You know, that goes back to, we're talking about legacy. When we first were doing shows, people would come to us, of course, they'd be watching a show. Oh man, we really love what you're doing. You know, where can we train? And as much as I like legacy, it's like we would be just feeding him students because of what we were doing. It's like, well, why wouldn't we do it ourselves? You know what I mean? It's like we had at the time Mike Modest, who was renowned from Beyond the Mat, APW. When the internet was basically being born, APW was one of the first, super feds that were indie that people on the East Coast knew about. So Mike Modest's name value was pretty good. And, you know, having Kenny King in the back pocket when we needed him was also there because Kenny was now a mainstay in Ring of Honor. So unfortunately, because of as big as the Boulder Highway School was, and the fact that they gave us rent for 33 cents a square foot, which nobody does these days. After that, it was 50 cents a square foot and 75 cents a square foot, that all of a sudden they kind of priced us out. And the school, as I've said before, is always been the money pit of FSW.
Yeah.
But we didn't run enough shows. And because of the shows and running them more frequently at the school, that would kind of help put us over the top to whether we would make money that month or not. Because for the first few years, it was always an extra 500, another 500, another 500 I'm putting into the, to pay for rent. Or, hey, I'm paying because somebody paid on the second and third. Now I can pay the rent from last month because, you know, in reality, somebody's $200 from the fourth is supposed to go toward the next month's rent. But we would have, you know, you're trying to cover everything. So it took a long time to where the school became a valuable commodity. And it wasn't the school that was the valuable commodity, it was the building. By having a building, it allowed us to do the shows. And then as more companies started rolling in, now Ring of Honor gives us a few bucks, and Impact gives us a few bucks, and GCW comes in and gives us a few bucks, and a couple of random people want to do shows. We've turned our facility, in reality, for our price, it's way better than going to the Space or whatever. We have built-in lighting. We have built-in monitors. We have a built-in production crew now if you want. Like, we're a full facility. We're a TV production house, per se, except that we just haven't been able to do it. And we've been fortunate to where even during the pandemic, where times are very tough, less students, closed for 3 months, example, that we've actually been able to, you know, cover a lot of the bills by having people coming in wanting to do shows. You know, I got another guy coming in who's run some shows in February, and he needs an empty arena, and he's going to film it for the internet and try to bring in some people, and, you know, he's going to pay us to use our stuff. So the trade school part of it's just too much work.
Sure.
You know, at this point to do that, you know, we try to squeeze in those, you know, promo classes here and there, but it's difficult because of everything that's going on. The student count has dropped. People don't be there as often. More people have lost their jobs. You know, that's something that would be on the back burner to when everything is really cleared up. Because initially we lost guys that just didn't want to come because of the pandemic. And then as things have gotten where more people are getting it, even more are dropping off. So the class numbers are not good at all. You know, between the holidays, between the counts, you know, they got to wear masks at all times now. So it's just become such a difficult process. It's so disappointing the way the year has ended that, you know, we figured at worst, all right, you know, January comes, Sam's Town, we're back, baby. And it's just like, you throw your hands in the air and being like, hey, could we run a private event for 30 of our best fans and have the Hyperstreak birthday party? You know what I mean?
And Greg, final question for you. I spent 10 years growing up, but youthfulness in my early 20s in Burbank, California. What is it like for you wrestling at that glorious Moose Lodge in Burbank?
Ah, so you're aware of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Man, wrestling, pro wrestling is something really special. Man, yeah, that's all I can say. It's something really special. It's something so different. Brian Kendrick, from working with Sin Bodhi and Freak Show. Well, Freak Show was always fun, but I was like, some of these ideas are kind of like so off the wall that even I don't get it. But Brian just has this way of making his absurd, weird ideas make the most sense. So you're having your giraffe fedoras, you're having your two-man gang, or like the guys who are two guys in one pair of pants fighting people off, and it's just so wildly entertaining. And I'm just really happy to be a part of that. From Brian, once again, being another one of my heroes, another one of my guys who have like taken me under their wing a bit and like been a mentor to me a lot. And that means more to me. And to be able to be like an integral part of his show is incredible. Myself, like you're saying, you're from Burbank.
I spent I grew up in Chicago, but I spent
Oh,
10
okay.
years in Burbank. So yeah.
Right. I'm also from the Valley, so Burbank is only about 30 minutes from Reseda. So I grew up from Reseda, actually right down the street from where PWG used to be. So the PWG shows, I used to actually just walk to those because I've been walking up and down that same street my whole life. Uh, but Burbank, man, that and it's such a tight crowd, and we moved all around. So we used to be in this one place where we could literally only fit 15 people. So the ring took up the majority of the room. You could barely walk around, and then the people were right here. So you're hitting the ropes and hoping not to like, kick somebody in the mouth or something. And then to move into the Moose Lounge, which is kind of compact, but you just get so much energy in that room
Yeah.
because you have to fit all of these people in there, and the people come. They it's a different type of wrestling show. Like you actually have your PWGs and your championship wrestling from Hollywood and so on and so forth. Well, we have our built-in own audience who love that weird off-the-wall wrestling that you're not going to find anywhere else in the world. And to be a part of that and to wrestle there is so tight.
That's good to hear. And you said Reseda, which makes me think of the old Reseda Country Club. Is that what it was called? Um,
Um,
the I forget what the building was called, but it's that shitty hot space in Reseda. I know I've been to a few times, and but that's the Valley in California. We're the
oh
Valley
yeah,
here in Las
yeah,
Vegas. So
yeah. Oh, it's
uh,
like 20 or 30 degrees higher than everywhere else in California. It's like why?
exactly. Um, as we wrap, Joe, any further thoughts on any information about what's going on with anything, or are you just totally in a hold right now?
I wouldn't say totally in a hold. We're talking about different ideas. Maybe you know maybe a Twitch only YouTube type event. Limit it, and maybe we can do the donations from our hardcore fans to watch a live event. Try to make it as interactive as possible. Once the new year hits, we're talking about doing a private event just for our special fans who have been with us through thick and thin. Just an opportunity to get some of the guys working in a match again, even if it's in front of
Yeah.
20 people. You know what I mean? It's like everybody's hungry to do it, and I'm tired of just sitting around. Go to the school for a half hour, fart around, try to put the idea together for a card that's not going to happen. Things like that. It gets kind of boring. Like, I need to do shit, and there's no shit to do. It's like we're getting a lot of things in place for the new year, moving forward to where we're hoping bigger things are happening. So we're putting all that logistic bullshit that always would fall by the wayside and getting things done and helping my son get his own, LLC up and running because his production stuff is doing very, very well, and he's gotten to work for some big companies and, has been doing a lot of work lately. and try to differentiate that, and, you know, getting new equipment, and, you know, we really upgraded everything. It'd be nice if we can actually use it more frequently.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, it's weird to think that, last year at this time, you're getting ready for the New Year's Eve show, and you would have had that again this year had there been no pandemic. And it's just, it's a shame because there's fun things like that that have just been, crushed, including the
Yeah, that,
anniversary.
that was a great time last year doing the New Year's. You know, this year would have been even better because there's even less to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we planned on it last month that we were going to do the New Year's Eve until the newer restrictions came down, that we kind of felt that it wasn't in our best interest to do it. You know, we had some great matches on that. The Sin and Funny Bone went right at midnight, or we got introduced to Parada, who now is part of the Bad Bitches. You know, we had some new talent come in, we had some old talent, and we were hoping that that was the start of a New Year's Eve tradition.
Well, hopefully we'll have a better New Year next year, and for years to come, the tradition will start up again. And in the meantime, everyone, please follow Hyperstreak. If you don't know his work, please look at YouTube, look at anything on the Twitch channel for FSW. Um, follow Greg's social media. Follow the FSW social media. Keep your eyes on what's going on, and hopefully there will be a chance for my LVTV to get going again. But again, with the pandemic and everything going on in the state, we're not too sure yet of what's good and what's not good, and what can happen and what can't happen. So be patient, but please continue to support FSW Future Stars Wrestling. And until next week, everyone, take care.
Later.